Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Is President Barack Obama delusional? That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. History will record that the two biggest deficits of the Obama administration were the failure to create a robust economy and the president's retreat from the terrorist battlefield. For years, Talking Points has been telling you the Obama administration has no strategy, none, to defeat the ISIS threat. Random bombing, not going to do it, and every honest military analyst knows it. But President Obama somehow does not seem to understand that the civilized world is losing the fight against ISIS. Just 9 hours before the Paris attack, this was broadcast.
ISIS is gaining strength, aren't they?
Well, I don't think they're gaining strength. What is true is that from the start, our goal has been first to contain, and we have contained them.
Obviously, that's not true. The United States and its allies have not contained ISIS. They are a threat worldwide. They continue to kill people with impunity. Nevertheless, the president is unrepentant and unwilling to admit that his strategy has failed, even though some of his own party take exception.
I've never been more concerned. I read the intelligence faithfully. ISIL is not contained. ISIL is expanding. They've just put out a video saying it is their intent to attack this country. And I think we have to be prepared.
We have to be prepared, Senator. So why not back that statement up with action and vote for Kate's Law, which punishes alien criminals who defy deportation, makes the country safer. There are more than a few terrorists in that crew. But back to the president. Even though France says the ISIS attack was an act of war, Mr. Obama not going to change his strategy.
When we send troops in, those troops get injured. They get killed. They're away from their families. Our country spends hundreds of billions of dollars. It's best that we don't shoot first and aim later. It's important for us to get the strategy right, and the strategy that we are pursuing is the right one.
How can that possibly be when ISIS continues to disrupt order all over the world? Simple question. President can't answer it, doesn't even address it. On the other side, the Republican Party is taking note.
I recognize that Barack Obama does not wish to defend this country, that he may have been tired of war, but our enemies are not tired of killing us, and they're getting stronger. Every region on earth has gotten worse under the Obama-Clinton foreign policy.
I hope Hillary Clinton, I hope the president will listen to what I'm saying. We don't have until the next election to deal with ISIL. There is a 9/11 coming, and it's coming from Syria if we don't disrupt their operations inside of Syria.
So Republicans now have an opportunity to make a campaign issue out of ISIS. It's clear most Democrats will not stop backing Mr. Obama on the issue.
Marco Rubio, also running for president, said that this attack showed, and the attack in Paris showed, that we're at war with radical Islam. Do you agree with that characterization, radical Islam?
I don't think we're at war with Islam. I don't think we're at war with all Muslims. I think we're at war with jihadists who have...
Just to interrupt, he didn't say all Muslims. He just said radical Islam. Is that a phrase you don't...
I think that you can talk about Islamists who clearly are also jihadists, but I think it's not particularly helpful.
Gobbledygook. It's just gobbledygook. Number one, Hillary Clinton tried to dodge the question by equating all Muslim with radical jihadists. She understood the question. She tried to dodge it. A 5-year-old would have understood the question. Number two, Mrs. Clinton has no strategy to defeat ISIS. None. Even worse is her competitor, Bernie Sanders.
In the previous debate, you said the greatest threat to national security was climate change. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism.
Senator Sanders just made a fool out of himself, so there you go. It is long past time that we the people demand ISIS be defeated, not contained. 2006, the organization was formed. 2013, it was named and began to accumulate power. Initially, President Obama called ISIS the junior varsity. But as the threat grew in ferocity and thousands of miles of territory was seized by ISIS, many expected the president to take aggressive action. He did not, ordering tepid bombing and outsourcing the ground fight to Iran. Is not aggressive action, Mr. President. Now critical mass has been reached, as Paris has been devastated.
Folks want to pop off and have opinions about what they think they would do. Present a specific plan. If they think that somehow their advisors are better than the chairman of my Joint Chiefs of Staff and the folks who are actually on the ground, I want to meet them.
Here I am, Mr. President. Here I am. Here's the strategy you should employ immediately. The President of France clearly stated the ISIS attack was an act of war. France is a member of the 28-nation NATO alliance. Article 5 of that alliance says that an attack on one country is an attack on all. So, all 28 nations should now begin to organize a campaign to crush the ISIS killers. That should include ground troops, bombings, no-fly zones, border security for Turkey, Jordan, Iraq, and a central command and control center based in Europe. Once NATO declares war on ISIS, things will radically change. The anti-ISIS Arab nations will step up their participation, and the jihadist group will begin to be isolated. No one is calling for an occupation of Syria and Iraq. That would be foolish. But surely, 28 nations can launch tactical strikes, both on the ground and in the air, that will crush these people. President Obama should take the lead, along with France and Great Britain, to make all that happen. The first step, a declaration of war on ISIS by NATO. Finally, it was quite clear in the president's press conference today that he is very concerned about the refugees fleeing Syria. And he should be concerned because it's his fault. When the Syrian dictator Assad used poison gas, President Obama threatened the man. You may remember he did not carry out his threat, which he could have easily done by destroying the Syrian Air Force on the ground, which was delivering some of the gas. The president's retreat from Syria has caused the massive refugee problem. And remember, one of the ISIS killers in Paris apparently posed as a refugee to enter France. Nonetheless, Mr. Obama is quite confident that no terrorists will be among the 10,000 refugees he wants to resettle in America. That, of course, is another delusion. And at least 15 states right now have already said they will not accept any refugees at all. Expect that number to grow as more and more Americans finally realize, that the President of the United States has lost control of the war on terror. And that's the memo. Next on the rundown.
Spark Cash Card from Capital One. Earn unlimited 2% cash back.
And in the Impact segment tonight, shortly after the Paris terror attack, the Wall Street Journal editorialized this way, quote, "These attacks are another dreadful reminder that the West's collective failure swiftly to defeat ISIS in its Syrian and Iraqi heartland has allowed this jihadist infection to spread into Afghanistan, Turkey, Sinai, and North Africa," unquote. What's needed now is a renewed sense of purpose to destroy the barbarians at the gate. But as stated in the Talking Points memo, President Obama doesn't see it that way. Joining us now from Washington, the former head of the Central Intelligence Agency, Ambassador James Woolsey. So, Ambassador, you just heard Charles Krauthammer and I talk about delusion on President Obama's part. You say?
I tilt more in Charles's direction on this. I think it's illusionary. I think he's trying to set up a situation where he comes up with a narrative, and then the narrative is what they reiterate. And if something departs from the narrative, an uncomfortable fact, they try not to talk about it or deal with it, or if in the worst case they may very slightly change the narrative. They go backwards. They start with the public relations and end up with the facts, whereas what one ought to do, I would think, is start by understanding the facts, develop a policy and a strategy and tactics, and change your tactics if you have to.
There are people who say the president does not understand or accept any factual data given to him. He just simply rejects it. Let's get to the United States, though. Obviously, ISIS has made threats to the homeland here, and with the porous borders and a whole bunch of other things in play, it seems to me that it will be happening fairly soon. Am I wrong?
Something will, I'm afraid, yes.
The main vulnerability of the country is what?
Well, I think one of the vulnerabilities, I mean, we're an open society, so it's very easy to kill large numbers of people. That's a big vulnerability. But I think we have a very dangerous situation in part because of the so-called reforms we've made in our intelligence collection, particularly communications intelligence. We didn't need to make those changes that followed the Snowden disputes. And they've made it a lot harder for us to figure out what our opponents are doing. In the meantime, commercial encryption has come along with PlayStations and the like, which make it easier for them on the other side to hide things from us. And we are not as into the other side's thinking as we have been in most of our wars for years.
So the civil libertarians have managed to give an advantage to the enemy, but also our policies. I mean, we don't have the border secure. We have sanctuary cities. People run in and out of here at will. I mean, it's not hard to get in here.
The sanctuary cities are, I think, particularly a terrible idea. Why one would not enforce the law and avoid killings such as the one that gave rise to your proposed...
Kate's Law, Kate Steinle, right?
I just don't understand. If someone is a convicted felon and ICE wants him in custody, then why should a city be willing or able to resist that?
And the president has taken no action against sanctuary cities. Wasn't it frightening to you, and it was frightening to me, to see Hillary Clinton ask a direct question about radical Islam, immediately deflect to Islam? It's a total fraud. She knows what the question was. But that signals that Hillary Clinton, who could be next president, is going to absolutely carry out every single thing that Barack Obama's doing.
Well, she tried to turn it into a straw man, and that debate tactic was one many of us learned in about the 6th grade, and it was old hat by the 7th. I mean, it was ridiculous.
All right, but remember now, she could be the next president. So 38% of the American people still support President Obama's war on terror strategy, still think he's doing a good job against ISIS, according to a AP poll. 38% of the country doesn't get it. Does that surprise you?
I suppose not. We are often slow to anger, and his overall strategy has been, in a sense, to keep people comfortable that something is working out well, whereas in fact it is not. I think that we have an extremely serious situation on our hands, as serious as we've had since World War II, easily.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, thank you. Plenty